Awesome. Hey, everyone. So great to see a packed crowd for a really important issue. My name is Zach Baker, and I'm the Regional and State Policy Director for the Northwest Energy Coalition. And we are a coalition that is over about 100 organizations in the Northwest that focuses on clean, equitable, and affordable energy policies. And we use our technical expertise and convening power of people and organizations to move those policies forward. I have some slides for you, and so looks like, thanks for getting them up here. Oh, there you go, thanks. Awesome. So I was asked to speak a little bit about, go a little bit deeper on energy and data centers, and also wanted to share, I served on the governor's data center work group over the last number of months, and was hoping to just share some takeaways from that and my experience on that, and then also talk a little bit about potential legislation coming up in the short session on data centers, so bringing the policy side of how to address data center impacts. So you might have seen this image / cartoon / opinion article in the Seattle Times a couple of weeks ago, and I think it illustrates many of the issues around data centers and energy use. And Neil gave a really nice setup for how much energy these data centers are using, and that is really the key. And what this cartoon is talking about, essentially, I know some folks might not be able to see it, so I'll read what it says, but it's basically a big picture of a data center, and it says, "Give me your grid. I don't care about salmon or your higher electricity bills or blackouts. I want power." So let's just break that down a little bit. So Sam did a great job talking about the salmon angle, and with energy use, we potentially overtax our hydropower system, which then leaves less water and less ability to support salmon recovery. And so that's the salmon part of this. The higher electricity bills part of it is that the more energy you need to build more support for the grid, transmission, and resources that then ratepayers are paying for to be able to power these data centers. The second part is that rate increases impact the most vulnerable and low-income folks the hardest, and that is also a really important piece of this issue around higher electricity bills from serving data centers. And then the blackouts part, the amount of energy that is needed to serve the data centers can cause reliability issues for our grid, potentially causing blackouts if energy is not managed well. And so that is a really important thing to also be thinking about with data centers. And the last two that I talked about, higher electricity bills and blackouts, the potential for blackouts, really underscores what's not in this cartoon for me, is that these represent a real challenge to our climate and clean energy goals in the state and being able to achieve those. And if we have higher electricity bills, there might be efforts to delay the targets that we have for climate and clean energy. If there are blackouts, that could also cause challenges for trying to achieve our climate and clean energy goals. The ability to meet our climate and clean energy goals really is dependent upon starting these data centers using clean energy from the jump. If they are relying on fossil fuels to power their data centers, then it will be much harder to achieve our climate and clean energy goals moving forward. It was also mentioned that some of the data centers are looking at nuclear to be able to power the data centers, and that it also brings its own host of environmental issues. So this one image really starts to encapsulate a huge piece of a work and a number of really important issues, which is why the Northwest Energy Coalition is very focused on addressing data center impacts. And it also doesn't have to be this way. Like this is, depicted as kind of end of the world type imagery. But there is also a lot of emerging information that there is a possibility that data centers could actually help the grid by being able to contribute to the grid. There's some flexibility and demand that they might be able to do where if there is a need for power, they might be able to help and maybe turn down their operations a little bit to be able to provide energy at peak times when it's most needed. So there is potentially an opportunity to work with the data centers to also improve our grid and help us accelerate meeting our climate and clean energy goals. With that said, there's a lot of work for us to do to get the protections in place that are needed to make that happen. So all of what I just said is exacerbated by the fact that there's just rapid growth projected for the data centers. So this is a slide from the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, which is a 4-state agency that works to plan on power issues for the region. And this is they did kind of a load projection, and they found that there are a few main drivers of load over the next few years and out through 2046, which is what they studied. So the three, which is the teal color or blue color, is the tech load forecast, and that's the one I want to zero in on, but I think it's important to see the context here. So before I do that, there's a tech load forecast, which is that blue teal one, and that is data centers and chip fabrication. And then there's transportation, which is the orange streak through the middle there, and that you can think of as like essentially electrifying vehicles as we move forward on the clean energy transition. And then there's a green line here, which is hydrogen. There's a lot of movement towards hydrogen for electricity and other uses. And so those are main drivers that they see for the load moving forward. As you can see, the tech load forecast is the largest and the most rapidly growing in the near term in particular. And that is really key because we don't have the power per se to be able to serve this load. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the load. You can see that there are 3 different lines in this tech load forecast. There's a low, a medium, and a high. So the medium, to put some numbers to it, would say by 2030 there would be another 2,200 average megawatts of power that the tech load would require. To put that in more understandable terms, Seattle is about overall energy is about 1,000 average megawatts, so we're talking about 2 Seattles. If you go to the high forecast, it's about 4,800 megawatts, so you're talking about 4 Seattles by 2030. So that just underscores the challenge that we have here with the amount of energy use. And again, there's a lot of uncertainty, but really important to see this type of very rapid growth and why all of the impacts that we talked about on the other slide are so important that we get ahead of. So with having seen all of those impacts on the slide, seeing the rapid growth, the Northwest Energy Coalition has been really trying to think about, okay, what do we need to do here to make sure that we address the data center impacts, and kind of boiled it down to 4 here key goals. There are many other pieces of this, but for me, protecting and furthering Washington's climate and clean energy goals, protecting non-data center utility customers from financial and reliability impacts, minimizing negative impacts to communities and natural resources, and then maximizing benefits to communities to the extent possible centers are going to be siting in those communities. Okay, so taking those kind of key goals, we went in and were invited to be on the governor's data center work group. You all may have heard about it. I'll give a quick rundown. The governor created this work group by executive order back in February, and the work group was charged with discussing the impacts of data centers on Washington State's economy, tax revenue, energy use, and the environment. And the work group met from May through early November, and the final report is coming out by December 1st to the governor. The work group discussion was broken up into two different subgroups, one focused on tax revenue and economic development. In Washington, data centers have tax exemptions on sales tax, and so that was a big focus of that tax revenue and economic development conversation of what to do about those tax incentives. And then the energy and resource impact subgroup focused a lot on many of the impacts that I talked about earlier. There were over 1,000 public comments submitted into the process. And then ultimately, the work group came up with 31 findings and 8 recommendations. There was a 9th that was voted down that focused on the tax incentive piece and clean energy. A bit more about that. And then there was an opportunity for work group members to submit what they termed minority reports on issues that were of concern coming out of the work group conversation or that weren't covered. And those have yet to be seen because they will be attached to the final report that comes out December 1st. So this is my summary of the work group recommendations. You can go on the Department of Revenue website where the recommendations are posted and the findings. But I tried to boil it down for you. It's so first, there's a recommendation around ensuring climate and clean energy laws cover data center energy use, which is a good recommendation. There are some ratepayer protections put in there. There's a lot of incentives for energy efficiency and demand flexibility. There's some reporting requirements around sustainability reporting and water usage. And then there are a couple of studies around siting and operation data centers and looking at on-site energy and demand response. There are also some load forecasting improvements that are recommended, and that gets at that kind of uncertainty in the tech load forecast that I was talking about earlier. And that's really important for utilities to be able to plan properly for data centers would be using. And then there were a number of recommendations around accelerating clean energy deployment, focused on transmission, siting, and permitting, and then existing and emerging technology. This is my kind of initial assessment of the work group outcomes. I think what I just ran through, it's a decent start, but it's incomplete and more is needed quickly, given what I showed about the projected rapid growth. And some examples of that are what to do with the tax incentives. There was a recommendation to include a clean energy requirement as part of the tax incentives. And that was voted down as part of a package around tax incentives, but is a really important piece for all the reasons that we've talked about earlier in this presentation. There's a lot of focus on incentives, and not as much focus on requirements for the data centers. And then there was, I would have liked to see more effort to ensure that the data centers are powering the data centers with clean energy from the jump or ASAP. There was no discussion of next steps or implementation of how all of these recommendations would move forward. So, I had a question: what comes after the report? What's the timeline for addressing the data center issues and the order of actions within those recommendations? And then resources. The state budget is pretty constrained right now, and a lot of the recommendations were around agencies taking action, and so a conversation around resources, staffing, and budget is really important. And I hope that translates over to the legislature. And I think that is, for me, where the work group conversation led, is that it was clear that there were a lot of urgent issues that were highlighted and potential impacts, and that there's a need for legislation. And there were multiple solutions presented as recommendations in the work group that would require legislative action. So to try to make that happen, we are in conversations with legislators in the state legislature about a potential bill on addressing data center impacts. And some of the key elements that we're looking for in that is ratepayer protection, so that regular ratepayers are not paying for the infrastructure that is needed to serve the data centers, and that the data centers would be paying their full costs of service. And then requiring some minimum standards and programming around data centers in the state, like focused on reporting of energy and water usage, energy efficiency measures, demand flexibility, and a number of other pieces to kind of set a floor for data centers to make sure that communities are protected and natural resources are protected. And then, as I mentioned, there are tax incentives on the books, and so to the extent that the state those tax incentives, to reform them to encourage a gold standard of data centers, move data centers beyond just the floor, but to do even better. That could also be contributions to the transmission system, to the grid. There's been a really cool idea that surfaced of bringing in, having data centers pay for home upgrades, like heat pumps and other energy efficiency for folks. Sorry for that. So that is, and then the last piece is just clarifying climate and clean energy laws to make sure that the data centers are covered and we're moving off of fossil fuels with clean energy for them. And then I'll just wrap up here that this effort is emerging and is moving very fast because the short session starts in January. So we're going to be building a legislative campaign around this, and would invite you to join and participate and help by connecting with me, and I can get you connected, contacting your legislator to say that data centers are a really important issue, providing public comments and testimony as the bill moves forward, and then lots of communication opportunities, op-eds in newspapers, social media, et cetera, and collective education, because things are moving very rapidly and there's a lot for us to learn, and at the same time there's a lot at stake. And so I look forward and hope that I get to work with you all on this really important issue, and thank you.